So then what made you stay? I mean, that you've been at YFC for a long time. Why do you keep coming to work every day?
That's complicated, but simple at the same time. Number one, the training, the spirit of the energy of the teams, all the collegial support that therapists receive, and the respect. And I continue to feel that respect. And now in my very, very senior years, I don't feel any kind of discrimination based on my age. And there aren't a lot of places that can say that. And so I feel valued. I'm a not-for-profit gal. I just am. And that's part of another reason why I stay. I was fortunate to receive some wonderful care during my early adult life when I was experiencing anxiety and some depression. I had insurance. I had coverage from my husband. And it wasn't until I got to YFC, I realized how lucky I had been, how really, really fortunate I had been. And I knew in my heart, I just knew in my heart I had to give back. And so I was fortunate enough to be asked. And so I could offer affordable, high quality therapy to anyone who wanted it, no matter what their circumstances. And so I stayed for the training opportunities, for the support, for the fun, for the serious talks, for the problem solving, and for the opportunity to get to know and to work alongside our board.
Awesome. Well, you are a super valued part of the team. I can't imagine a YFC without you myself.
Thank you.
Gary, I'm going to switch over to you because you have a really different path to YFC. So can you tell us a little bit about, you had a successful medical practice and how did you end up at YFC?
I had the practice. I was part of a large group practice and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it until 2 years ago when I retired. But in the 90s, when medicine was changing and things were becoming different, I just wanted to see if I could do something different as well. And I applied to Northwestern for the counseling psychology program and I got it. And I maintained my full-time job at the same time as a foot and ankle surgeon. And when it came time to do the internship, I said, what am I going to do? I've got a full-time job. How am I going to do an internship somewhere? So I spoke to classmates and people who had been through them, and they said, YFC is a gem of a program. You will be treated like you're an adult. When you have a client, yes, you'll have to be there and you'll have to go there for the staff meetings, but you don't have to be there just for the sake of being there. So I applied, put on a three-piece suit and was interviewed by Don McDevitt. And fortunately, I was accepted. What keeps me there, I'm going to build a little bit on what Carol just keeps me there. The work is compelling. I mean, that's the best word I can describe it. I look forward. I now come 2 days. I look forward to coming to YFC and dealing with the challenges of the couples. I like to say I treat couples in very difficult situations. I look forward to that. And then there is the camaraderie among the staff. There is a genuine affection of the therapists for each other. And I may say the administrative wing as well. And that's really what keeps.
How is that different? I mean, we've already talked a little bit about our culture, but Gary, how is that different than like your medical practice? I mean, you were in two perhaps really different work cultures.
Absolutely different world. And Thursday mornings was one of my surgery days. So I would be in surgery.
Oh my gosh.
I would be in surgery Thursday morning doing some very specific, defined things. and then come to YFC, and you were always very nice if I was late to meetings, and sometimes I was, and see clients Thursday afternoon. And instead of it being defined, and this is the problem, and you solve the problem, it was more ambiguous. But I found that fascinating. I find it fascinating to this day. It's much more collaborational with clients. When I treat couples, it really has to be a collaboration, as opposed to a physician and surgeon says, this is what I recommend, this is what we're going to do. So it was almost as much as I enjoyed the other, it's been liberating coming for me emotionally, coming and being part of YFC. And I'm just so grateful that over the years you accepted me here in a very minimal role. And now I have a greater role, but you accepted me for the 20 years that I only could be here for a few hours. I'm eternally grateful for that.
Well, you're also a very valued member of our team. And I know that I appreciate your experiences because you bring a different perspective with your business background too, and running a medical practice. And of course, the Tavistock work. Can
Yes.
you explain a little bit what that is to our guests? Because I don't know that I know it well enough that I could do a good job explaining it, but it's super cool.
Right. It's really interesting. Northwestern every year up to now, the format is changing now, but has had what's called a group relations conference, and it is an experiential conference. You don't sit and listen to a lecture. You are part of small groups. You're part of larger groups, and you learn how you behave, how a group affects you. I'm what's called a small group consultant. I'm placed in small groups, and I'm able to try to get the sense of the group and help the group do its work, learning about it. That's probably the simplest way to describe it.
Is that something then that translates into your couples work?
You know, it does, because when you think about it, a couple is a small group, and when I join that small group, we have 3 people. And I find myself sometimes saying to a couple, I'll just use an example. I might say, this is right out of this Tavistock conference, I'm feeling really sad right now. I'm feeling an enormous sadness. And I'm wondering if it's really coming from one of you right now. That might be a consultation I would make in a Tavistock group. And I use it in couples. I find myself sometimes welling up, being really affected by what I'm hearing from a couple and what I've learned through this Northwestern Tavistock experience. Tell them, share it, and see how they respond. It really does help the work.
And when did you, I'm super curious now. So I don't know, when did you start doing that? I mean, because you went back, you did counseling, you did the internship, and then you went back again for more training?
You know, my last, I think the year I graduated Northwestern, they formed like a mini Tavistock conference for undergraduate students as opposed to normally the ones for graduate. And my fantasy is that they asked me because they couldn't find anybody else. Now, maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But once they asked me, I developed an interest in it. I found it was absolutely applicable. I do at Youth and Family. And it made me better with my podiatry partners. We were a group. Medical practices, law practices, accounting practices, groups have conflict and have problems with each other. So I would share with my medical practice group, and I think it's one of the reasons we stayed together.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Super interesting. Thank you. One of the other things that I think is super interesting about both you, Gary, you and Carol, is you guys have a supervisor relationship. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. You know, Carol, you've been Gary's clinical supervisor, and I know that's a super important role. We've talked a little bit already about the kind of support that we give our therapists. You know, therapists need a safe place where they can seek help and support. And so, Carol, can you explain a little bit about what supervision is and why it's so important?
Sure. Supervision is a very unique and exciting learning experience. It offers support, it offers training, and it's aimed at effective and to increase the effectiveness and perceptiveness of clinicians. So in supervision, we actually deepen our own, as clinicians, our own awareness, self-awareness. We have to go inside. You know, mental health practitioners are one of the few careers where it is strongly encouraged. Wasn't legal in the universities, but it's becoming more legal in the universities. Strongly encourage counselors in training to have their own treatment experience. And so to be able to sit in the room with another is such an awesome responsibility. And for me personally, when I first began, I felt scared. I felt intimidated. I wondered, you know, who am I to guide this person who's entrusting themselves to me? And then I went to my supervisor. And my supervisor was experienced and supportive and helped me understand how what I was feeling and thinking could be getting communicated in the very room that I was working with a client, and that could get in the way. And that got me really interested in the deep work I had done for so many years for myself.
Yeah.
And so when I'm in the room with a supervisee, I like to focus on where the clinician is, not just the book learning, not just what happened in the session between you and the client, but what's going on with you right in that moment when the client said this. What were you feeling? Because that's apt to get in the way. If we can't master our own feelings, that can get in the way of what we're doing in the room with the client. And it can distract, and it could wind up being our own agenda unconsciously. We don't even know it. So therefore, in supervision, my role is to help guide the clinician to greater and deeper self-discovery. And there are clinical terms for that: transference, countertransference. And we use those terms, and we have to pay attention to it. So in other words, we deepen our own self-awareness and what we bring to the role. And we sharpen the best parts of ourselves. And we use that for the therapeutic process. And then the other part is we learn to manage the parts of ourselves that might be apt to get away with. We don't want that to happen in the room. Not that it doesn't, not that it can't. And that's the beauty of supervision. In the supervisory capacity, the supervisor and the clinician become very, very close. It is an intimate space. There is confidentiality, just like there is with the client. And so in a trusting relationship, the therapist, the clinician, can unfold to the supervisor what might be happening in their own personal life. And it's up to the supervisor to make suggestions or to even encourage the therapist to see their own therapist, because it's not the supervisor's job to fix that.
Yeah. And I want to share for our guests that at YFC, our clinicians have clinical supervisors, and that is not the same person who is their like job supervisor who evaluates their work. So we really
Right, good point. Mm-hmm.
we try to preserve that safe space. It's really like, how do you make yourself vulnerable and grow and learn if you are thinking I'm going to be evaluated on, you know, my supervision. And so we separate those two roles at YFC, and it's a little bit more management, but I think it's an excellent investment. And Carol, I know you make very deep relationships, and then you do the amazing job of keeping up with everybody. I don't know how you do it. I count on you to show me baby pictures and wedding pictures of former interns and former YFC employees. So you have an amazing network.
Yeah, it's really been a joy. And I'm doing it outside too at Northwestern. So I get to have students from their master's program and continue to do that weekly. So makes me feel wonderful. I love the teaching part.
No, you do. And you're really good at it too.
And I grow from every single student.
Awesome. So Gary, what was it like being a surgeon and an intern with a supervisor?
Well, I did separate them, but although I actually have had patients over the years. I've operated on a few of the therapists over the years and some board members as well, who are not current ones. So go figure. But I mean, to talk about supervision, I mean, I felt so fortunate to have basically in the 20 some odd years I've been here, I've had two supervisors, Don McDevitt and Carol. And Carol not just has wisdom, but I've learned from her how to be much more empathic with my clients. One of the fabulous things about being a therapist at Youth and Family is everybody has the opportunity for supervision. And some years I've taken more advantage of it than others. But everybody, Carol has told me she goes for supervision periodically on certain cases. I mean, we all have that opportunity. And then last month and this month, I've been asked to, in effect, supervise the emerging therapist group, which blows me away because although I'm there giving them, imparting my so-called wisdom to them, I, as Carol said, I am learning from them. The cases that I talk to them about, I ask their opinions of. So that's been one of the wonderful things that YFC does. The consultation groups that we have every Thursday, every therapist here is part of a consultation group. That's supervision, but we do it for ourselves. We talk about cases among ourselves, and it's confidential, and it's a wonderful learning experience for us.
There is one thing, Janelle, if I may, I just wanted to say the National Association of Social Workers has in its code of ethics certain guidelines, and we are mandated to continue supervision or consultation for our entire clinical life. So it's in keeping with that, and I can't imagine not doing that.
Got it. Well, and Gary, I think when you're talking about all the different opportunities, there, especially the emerging clinicians who are, working under supervision and a provisional license, they have the emerging clinician group, which meets every week, and they have individual supervision, and they have the consult groups where you have a room of all different levels of work and all different licensures too at YFC, because we have all different licensures. I just want to call folks' attention to the letters after Gary and Carol's names. So Gary's a professional counselor and Carol's a social worker, which are two different educational and I guess paths and licenses and perhaps frameworks. But at the end of the day, at YFC, when that door closes and you're working with a client, the work is very similar. You might just be thinking about it a little differently. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
but like the collaboration that Carol and I do, I think brings us even closer in our work. And because there really is an interchange of ideas. I mean, Carol asks me all the time about certain methods that I'm using that perhaps might be from hers. And I am very interested in her method. So we learn from each other.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's one of the great things about working in a YFC. And Gary, I remember you saying something to me after a staff meeting when we were talking about, what makes YFC, what's our secret sauce. And you said to me, you let us be all in with our clients and you provide the support that we need to be able to be totally available and for our clients. So we provide the support. So I'm glad that we do all of these things and that it's for you, but it's also for our clients, right? It does trickle down. So, let's pivot a bit to 2020 and kind of the current times. It's been a rough go with COVID and the pandemic and remote work. And we hear all about how people are struggling, teenagers, moms, but therapists are people too. And I know that it's been hard for all of us working at YFC to maintain our services. And I am super proud of the work we've done to not only maintain services, but also maintain the quality of services that we deliver for our clients. And it took some figuring out. So some themes that we dealt with were like physical office spaces to remote work, and how do we work with kids and families with Zoom, and how do we deal with all this new technology, and what about work-life balance and our boundaries? So can we talk a little bit about what it's been like for you guys to live through this, and what kind of challenges you experienced from your seat as therapists, and how did you address them? So Gary, let's start with you. How'd you do?
Well, I may take a slightly contrarian point of view to what you just said.
Go for it.
I have found this to be more of an opportunity than a challenge. I'm seeing all my clients now on Zoom.
Okay.
I really like it. And I literally can go into their homes when I have a couple. Sometimes I'm in their bedroom. I mean, this is all useful information. I need their dog, So I think it allows me to be more intimate with them. I even think perhaps it allows them to be more comfortable and talk about some of their, I'm hesitating whether to tell this one story, but like I had one couple that hadn't been intimate for more than a decade. And I only was with them on Zoom. And, without going into too much detail, I was really able to work with them on reestablishing physical contact, as well as other contact that needed to be established. And I think it was easier on Zoom to do that than it might have been in person.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a point of view. I am going to continue working with couples in this way as long as it's legal and it works for the agency, because I actually think it's been helpful.
That's super interesting. Carol, do you feel the same way?
I have mixed reviews. Initially, I worried about the setting up a room that was going to really look professional. And I had to make all kinds of changes, and I was irritated by that, but I figured it out. After that, I wound up getting frequent headaches because of the screen usage. And our eyes are not designed to be looking at a screen for 6-8 hours. We're just not. And so I had to figure out how to space my clients a little differently than I had when I was in person. And then technology, because of my own learning challenges, was difficult for me. And in person at the office, I could open the door, grab somebody by their sleeve, bring them in, and one-on-one, could you please show me how to do this? I couldn't do that.
Right? Yes.
So I felt at a loss. But you know what? No matter what, there was always somebody on the other side of the telephone or on the computer to guide me. And last ditch efforts, I'd go over to Gary's house and he could show me one-on-one.
I know, I was happy to.
Both of our masks on the other, on opposite sides of the table. Okay, this is what you do. And that's what I needed to learn what I was doing. So as far as my client's experience, I've been taking a poll, kind of a poll,
Okay.
to an informal poll, because my thoughts are I'd like to set up a hybrid schedule. And so because I see so many seniors, because a lot of seniors don't have computers, a lot do, but a lot don't, I'm doing phone sessions. And I've been asking my clients, what would you prefer? Would you prefer to come to the office and do face-to-face work? Or would you prefer? And so I'm just, gathering my statistics and seeing what the preferences are. And I know that there are lots of seniors that are very content be on the phone. And those that I do Zoom with, they're good too. And they're ambivalent, whatever you want, Carol.
Okay.
So it's kind of an interesting balance. And my fear is that Medicare, Medicaid, and some of the private insurance carriers will stop offering telehealth as an option, which will limit what we can do. Right. So that's a concern that I have no control over.
Yeah. How did you guys manage compassion fatigue? We hear that term, compassion fatigue and burnout. I mean, at the core, you guys are empathic and compassionate, but there's only so much of you, right? And so how has that been for the last 13 months with managing to not get burned out? Or are you burned out?
I think in the early months, I was feeling very depleted. I was very exhausted. And I talked to a lot of my colleagues and people outside of the agency who were also practitioners. Everybody was feeling the same way. So we were all in the soup together. And we were all transitioning and trying to figure out how to manage this. And everybody had an idea of what they did, and we offered it. So I wound up really going deep into meditation. And I had been doing some meditation and learning an awful lot through my Native American practices. But I was going deeper into that, and that's what I began to do. And even when I had a hard time falling asleep at night, because I was so tired, I began breathing meditation work in a different way, and I could just kind of let go then. And in the beginning, it was tears, and it was a lot of just exhaustion. Yeah.
It was a lot.
Yeah. But connecting with others and knowing I wasn't alone, I wasn't unique to this experience, was very helpful.
Gary, how'd you feel?
Yeah, I mean, just building on what Carol just said about connecting with others. A few weeks ago, one of the other therapists sort of had a little online party that we all had. You've, Janelle, planned something for a couple of weeks from now. I'm hoping we can do a song together at it. But it's just that sort of thing that really helps a lot, and it helps the collegiality, and because you allow me to to be at YFC, limited hours really protects me from burnout or the fatigue that you were talking.
Yeah. Well, I'm watching our time, and Alyssa, do we want to see if folks have any questions from the chat for Gary and Carol? I mean, I get to talk to you guys all the time, every day, but not everybody else will have this opportunity to ask you questions. So
Yeah, so what we can do is right now we don't have any questions in the chat, but I can give you some questions like from Q&A that we can talk about. And so if someone does have questions that come up while we're doing this, while we're discussing this one topic and the next topic, please do put them in the chat or the Q&A, whichever you prefer. The first one for both Carol and Gary is, what is one of your proudest moments or memories from your time with YFC?
I have two memories. One was at my 30th anniversary. It was YFC golf outing. And I invited my family to attend because I was told that I was going to be presented with a commemorative gift. And I was so thrilled to see all my colleagues there, the board members there, and to receive the acknowledgement of the work that I had done. And I was very proud of that moment. And the other thing was I was standing in a security line at O'Hare about 5 years ago. And you know how you go back and forth. And there was a man that tapped me on the shoulder. And I turned around and he looked very familiar. And it turned out he was one of my very first clients. He recognized me and he called me by name. And he said, "Can I hug you?" This is before COVID. He said, "I just want to tell you." And then he explained how he felt about having been helped and in a very, very dark time in his life and how it turned his life around. And that was so gratifying and so rewarding. I can get teary right now. And when I remember that moment, and it just lifted me. It's the rewards that we get when we know we've done a good job.
and it's nice when you get to see them after all those years.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I would just say, I mean, it just happened 3 months ago when Gina asked me to lead the emerging therapist group. I felt really that my skills, my abilities I just hadn't considered that I would ever be, it never even occurred to me that I would lead this group. So I would say that was what it was.
Okay.
Alyssa, are we getting some questions?
Yes, we are. So another one from the Q&A is, have your clients had new challenges due to COVID?
I would say what I've seen is anxiety. I haven't had any clients who got sick from it, but it's definitely increased the anxiety. Couples have to spend more time at home together as well. So those are the two challenges that I've seen that I'm working more with.
I have a client who has suffered from chronic depression for most of his adult life. And when things are very, very bad for him, he becomes very isolative. And so he had a sense of humor from the COVID, actually, because he said, now everybody else can experience what I experience because everybody has to be in their home, just like me. And so that was an interesting twist. And otherwise, I would say the isolation and the really, really, in some severe anxiety about leaving their home and feeling guilty, lots of guilt if they were to go to the store and worry about what might happen and would they spread it. And So lots of anxiety.
Mhm.
Awesome. So our next question is, have you ever supervised a therapist who did not end up becoming a therapist? Or how, and if so, how did you handle such a difficult situation?
I personally have not supervised anyone who has not become a therapist, but I think there was an intern at Youth and Family that decided to not be a clinician. That was way back. They decided to stay in the helping profession. They recognized their own limitations kind of early on. And it was decided that it would be best for them to pursue other opportunities in order to fulfill their own goals. I hope that answers your question.
Gary, do you have anything to add? Okay.
No.
Awesome. So next one is going to be, what can we do to remove the stigma attached to some folks who seek counseling for mental health issues?
Well, I think the stigma is much less than it was a number of years ago. I mean, and I think a part of it is just doing things like this, just the publicizing of what we do. But it seems to me it's much more socially acceptable these days. Carol, what do you think?
I think the mental health stigma is out of the closet, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think that we need more education and outreach in our communities in order to further reduce the mental health stigma and continue to offer programs in the community, in our county, to educate. And in order to attract high quality clinicians who can support themselves in a not-for-profit world and have a living wage, we have to continue to seek funding. I mean, we just have to.
Agreed.
And be more and more creative about whatever we do. Everybody's got a stake in the game. I mean, the trickle-down effect.
Absolutely.
Right.
Great. So our next one is, would you, or how would you encourage a young person who is considering entering the field of mental health?
I would certainly encourage them. I think it's a great field. It's so socially useful. It's so important. Anybody who cares about this world and society and making the world a better place, I think, obviously it's not for anybody, but for everybody. But if somebody's interested, I would do everything to encourage.
I personally would encourage them to look into volunteering, to find get their toes in the water by looking at not-for-profit or even for-profit facilities that would be willing to take on volunteer positions and just get a taste of it. And I enjoy having people call me up, and that happens pretty regularly, calling me up and saying, I don't know whether to become a social worker or a counselor or a psychologist and get my PhD. And I kind of go through all the different kinds of possibilities. Social work is so broad that it's a great career. But I would definitely encourage somebody younger to do something, volunteer somewhere.
Mhm. And yeah, Carol, you're right. We do talk to, we do this a lot. We talk to people who are interested and want to learn more. And I know that's fun for all the clinicians. You guys enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's great. So we previously got a question that Gina actually answered. The question was, is there a difference in the handling of a person who is, say, suicidal virtually versus in person? And Gina said, yes, with an exclamation point. So if any of you, either of you want to speak to that, feel free.
Well, I had one that I sought supervision from Carol about, and it was handled totally virtually. And I think it turned out, fortunately, quite well.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Gina?
Yeah, Gina just told me.
Sorry, Gina.
Yeah.
I thought that said, okay, so to clarify, Gina
Right.
said yes to a previous response from Gary, and that wasn't after that question, just the timing of when they came in looks like she did. But yeah, so back to that, Carol, if you want to.
So in person
want.
versus virtually, if we in person, if we evaluate someone who in person who may be at risk, who we determine is at risk of hurting themselves or another, we typically would call an emergency contact, and we would ask that they come to the agency. We would seek help if they were resistant, and because it would be important to get to the emergency room and get evaluated by the folks that are there. We can do our own assessment, but it's important. Okay, that's why we get the client's address important. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Gina.
Yes.
Right.
And y'all, I'm not a clinician, but I do sit on a lot of countywide committees and groups, and COVID has changed emergency response a little bit. And there's a really cool effort going on with Advocate. And there's a new program that allows the first responders to offer behavioral health emergency calls once they've been evaluated. They are, in some cases, they don't always have to go to the emergency department. They can go to an alternative, less stressful location if the need isn't, if it's determined that it's not so acute. So I think COVID has forced a little bit of rethinking about how we manage suicidal ideations and the response, especially with anxiety about going to a hospital where there is COVID. It's been, I think it's still evolving. So that's something to watch for maybe in the future.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. So we have 2 questions left currently that we got submitted. So the first one is, have you noticed a tendency of preference of in-person counseling based on the client's age group?
I only treat adults, really, so but Carol, I know what do you find?
Most of my clients are seniors, but not all. And I have 2 or 3 clients who work, and they would like very much for me to be in the office and see me face to face. Like I said, the seniors are very happy not to have to get in the car and drive, and they're content. So we'll see.
Right now, only about 15% of our clients are coming in, and a fair portion of those are the adolescents and the kids. Gina, type in the chat if I'm wrong, but that think that's a fair number of them who need that face-to-face contact and that one-on-one work. Oh, she says I'm correct on that one. So Alyssa, I am watching our time. We have like 1 more minute. Is it a quick question and then we can wrap up?
It is a perfect one to close on, and it is quick. The question is, how would you describe YFC in 1 word?
Oh,
If you can.
quick but hard.
Yeah, indescribable. Or
It's hard. That's
special.
the first word that came to mind is excellence. And the second word is 2 words, sorry. Culturally diverse.
Okay, good.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, Gary and Carol, thank you first and foremost for doing this and being the very first Fireside Chat and talking and sharing a little bit about your journeys and what it's like being a clinician at YFC. And to our guests in the audience, thank you. Thanks for taking time out of your day to spend with us and learn more about YFC. We plan to host chats like this every 6 to 8 weeks. So if you like this one, please look out in your email for future events. So thank you to everybody. Have a great rest of your evening. And I hope to see you again. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.